In the heart of Soviet Ukraine, the city of Pripyat stood as a testament to nuclear ambition, a modern marvel built for the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Life in Pripyat was idyllic, a carefully constructed paradise with amenities unheard of in other parts of the Soviet Union. The Chernobyl plant itself, featuring 4 RBMK 1000 reactors, was a cornerstone of the Soviet energy program. However, beneath this facade of power and progress lay a deeply flawed design, a secret known only to a select few. The RBMK reactor was inherently unstable at low power levels, a catastrophic vulnerability hidden from the very people who operated it daily. Furthermore, the reactor lacked a proper containment structure, a cost-saving measure that would have devastating consequences. On the fateful night of April 25, 1986, the operators of Reactor 4 began a long-delayed safety test. The test was designed to see if the plant's steam turbines could power the emergency coolant pumps in the event of a power failure. The procedure was already risky, but a series of delays and operational missteps pushed the reactor into an extremely volatile state. The operators, under pressure and following a flawed checklist, disabled critical safety systems, including the automatic shutdown mechanism. They struggled for hours to stabilize the reactor, its power levels fluctuating wildly. The core was being poisoned by a buildup of xenon-135, a neutron-absorbing byproduct. To counteract this, they withdrew an unsafe number of control rods from the core. This action was akin to removing the brakes from a speeding car. The operators were effectively flying blind, unaware of the true state of the reactor's core. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26th, the decision was made to initiate the emergency shutdown by pressing the AZ5 button. In a cruel twist of irony, the very mechanism designed to save them sealed their fate. The graphite tips of the RBMK control rods caused a massive power surge in the unstable lower core as they were inserted. Within seconds, an unimaginable amount of energy was released. The first explosion, a steam explosion, blew the 2,000-ton reactor lid clean off. A few seconds later, a second, more powerful explosion ignited the graphite moderator, spewing a radioactive inferno into the night sky. The core of Reactor 4 was now open to the atmosphere, a nuclear volcano erupting with deadly isotopes. The night shift workers were the first victims, many killed instantly by the blast or exposed to fatal doses of radiation within minutes. A hauntingly beautiful, multicolored flame rose into the sky, a phenomenon the unsuspecting residents of Pripyat watched from their balconies. They were told it was a simple fire at the plant, nothing to worry about. Firefighters arrived at the scene within minutes, completely unaware of the radioactive danger. They ascended the roof of the turbine hall, battling the intense heat and flames with no protective gear against the invisible poison. These brave men were doomed, absorbing lethal doses of radiation as they fought a fire that could not be extinguished with water. The graphite burned for days, releasing a plume of radioactive material that would travel for thousands of miles. In the Kremlin, the initial reports were downplayed, a mixture of disbelief and a deep-seated instinct for secrecy. Mikhail Gorbachev was initially told of a minor accident and a fire, not a catastrophic core explosion. The Soviet state apparatus, built on control and information suppression, was ill-equipped to handle a disaster of this magnitude. Pripyat's 50,000 residents were not immediately evacuated. For a full 36 hours, they went about their lives. Children played outside, and weddings took place, all while radioactive particles rained down upon them. The evacuation, when it finally came, was sudden and chaotic, announced as a temporary 3-day measure. Residents were told to pack only essential documents and a small amount of food, leaving behind their homes, pets, and possessions forever. The world remained oblivious until radiation alarms were triggered at the Forsmark nuclear power plant in Sweden, over 1,000 kilometers away. The Swedes, after confirming their own plant was secure, traced the radiation back to the Soviet Union. Faced with undeniable international evidence, the Soviet government was forced to admit that an accident had occurred. The scale of the disaster, however, was still a closely guarded secret. A vast exclusion zone was established around the plant, a dead zone where human habitation would be impossible for centuries. A monumental cleanup operation, known as liquidation, began. Hundreds of thousands of liquidators, soldiers, miners and civilian volunteers were conscripted from across the Soviet Union. These men were tasked with the Herculean effort of decontaminating the land and containing the still-burning reactor. Miners were brought in to dig a tunnel beneath the reactor core to prevent a molten radioactive mass from burning through the concrete pad and contaminating the groundwater. They worked in extreme heat and high radiation, many without adequate protection. On the roof of the plant, the radiation was so intense that it destroyed the electronics of remote-controlled robots. In their place, human biorobots were sent in, clearing radioactive debris in frantic 90-second shifts. Their sacrifice was immense, their health irrevocably compromised. To entomb the destroyed reactor, a massive steel and concrete structure, the sarcophagus was hastily constructed. It was a temporary solution, built under extreme conditions, designed to contain the remaining radioactive material for at least 30 years. The hidden truth of Chernobyl was not just in the flawed reactor design, but in the culture of secrecy that allowed it to happen. The operators were not villains, but victims of a system that prioritized production quotas over safety and withheld critical information. The disaster exposed the deep-seated rot within the Soviet system, its inability to be transparent with its own people and the world. The health consequences have been severe, with thousands of cases of thyroid cancer in children, and ongoing debates about the full extent of the death toll. The official Soviet count of 31 deaths was a gross understatement of the true human cost. The Chernobyl disaster was a turning point in history, a catalyst that accelerated the collapse of the Soviet Union, shattered the myth of Soviet technological superiority, and exposed the moral bankruptcy of a government that would sacrifice its own citizens to protect its image. The story of Chernobyl is a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked power, the importance of scientific integrity, and the catastrophic price of lies. The exclusion zone, now a haven for wildlife, stands as a ghostly monument to this human-made cataclysm. Pripyat remains a silent, decaying city, its empty schools and amusement park a chilling reminder of the lives abruptly abandoned. The legacy of Chernobyl is etched into the very DNA of the land and its people, a wound that will never fully heal. It is a story of profound tragedy, but also of incredible heroism and sacrifice. The liquidators who knowingly walked into the heart of the inferno are the unsung heroes of this disaster. Their actions saved millions of lives across Europe. The disaster forced a global re-evaluation of nuclear safety standards and fostered a new era of international cooperation. The long-term effects on the environment and human health are still being studied. A grim, multi-generational experiment. The soil and water around Chernobyl remain contaminated with isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90. The forests in the exclusion zone are now an eerie mix of life and decay, a unique and dangerous ecosystem. The story continues to unfold as the original sarcophagus deteriorates and a new, larger confinement structure is built to secure the site for the next century. Lessons of Chernobyl are more relevant than ever in a world still grappling with the promise and peril of nuclear energy. It reminds us that the pursuit of technological advancement must always be tempered with humility and a profound respect for the forces we seek to control. The truth of Chernobyl, once buried under layers of Soviet secrecy, served as a permanent reminder of our capacity for both monumental error and extraordinary courage. The disaster was a crucible that tested the limits of human endurance and the strength of the human spirit. The silent, radioactive landscape is a classroom for future generations, teaching a harsh lesson written in isotopes and sorrow. The world learned that a nuclear accident anywhere is a nuclear accident everywhere. The invisible cloud of radiation respected no borders, a terrifying demonstration of global interconnectedness. The political fallout was as significant as the radioactive fallout, shaking the foundations of a superpower. The event forced a policy of glasnost, or openness, that the Soviet system could not ultimately survive. The individual stories of the people of Pripyat, the firefighters, and the liquidators paint a human-scale picture of the immense catastrophe. Their personal tragedies are the true measure of the disaster's cost. The iconic Ferris wheel in Pripyat, which was never used, has become a global symbol of the tragedy. It stands frozen in time, a monument to a future that never was. The initial denial and misinformation campaign by the Soviet government created a deep and lasting distrust between the state and its people. This breach of trust was a critical factor in the Union's eventual dissolution. The scientific community was forced to confront the limitations of its knowledge and the ethical responsibilities of nuclear engineering. The disaster highlighted the critical need for independent regulatory oversight and a robust safety culture. The economic cost of the cleanup and resettlement was staggering, placing an immense burden on the already struggling Soviet economy. The agricultural lands of Belarus and Ukraine were poisoned for generations, devastating the region's farming communities. The psychological trauma inflicted on the survivors and their families is a significant, though often overlooked, aspect of the disaster's legacy. Many evacuees faced discrimination and were stigmatized as Chernobylites. The disaster revealed the vulnerability of even the most seemingly powerful nations to technological failure. It was a humbling experience for a world that had grown confident in its mastery over the atom. The bravery of the helicopter pilots who flew over the exposed core, dropping sand, lead, and boron to quell the fire, was another chapter in the story of incredible sacrifice. They flew through lethal plumes of radiation, their cockpits unprotected. The nurses and doctors who treated the first responders in Pripyat and Moscow worked under horrific conditions, witnessing the gruesome effects of acute radiation syndrome. They too became victims, their heroism largely unacknowledged at the time. The disaster's narrative is filled with what-ifs. What if the test had not been delayed? What if the safety systems had not been disabled? What if the reactor had a containment building? The chain of events that led to the explosion was a perfect storm of design flaws, human error, and systemic dysfunction. The RBMK reactor was designed for a dual purpose: power generation and the production of weapons-grade plutonium, a fact that influenced its compromised safety features. This military-industrial priority put millions of civilian lives at risk. The knowledge of the reactor's instability was classified information, a secret that proved to be deadly. The operators were not given the information they needed to make safe decisions. The disaster served as a powerful anti-nuclear symbol, energizing environmental movements around the world. It fundamentally changed the public conversation about the risks and benefits of nuclear power. The exclusion zone has become a unique laboratory for studying the long-term effects of radiation on ecosystems. Scientists from around the world travel there to research how nature adapts and recovers from such a catastrophic event. The story of the babushkas of Chernobyl, a small community of elderly women who refused to evacuate and return to their ancestral homes within the zone, is a testament to the deep connection between people and their land. They live a simple, self-sufficient life in one of the most contaminated places on Earth. The Chernobyl disaster is not just a historical event. It is an ongoing process. The radioactive isotopes will persist for thousands of years. a lethal inheritance for countless future generations. The new safe confinement structure, a massive arch slid over the old sarcophagus, represents a monumental feat of modern engineering and international cooperation. It is designed to allow for the eventual dismantling of the destroyed reactor, a task that will take decades and immense resources. The memory of Chernobyl is preserved in the stories of its survivors, in the scientific data, and in the haunting, abandoned landscape of the exclusion zone. It is a memory the world cannot afford to forget. The disaster underscores the idea that true security comes not from military might or technological prowess, but from transparency, accountability, and a commitment to human life. The hidden truths of Chernobyl, now exposed, reveal the fragility of our complex technological systems and the profound consequences of ignoring them. Final lesson is one of humility in the face of nature's power, even the power we have unlocked ourselves. The atom, once hailed as a source of limitless clean energy, showed its terrifyingly destructive potential. The names of Valery Legasov, the scientist who led the investigation, and Boris Sherbina, the government official in charge, are now synonymous with the Chernobyl response. Legasov, in particular, fought to expose the truth about the RBMK's flaws, a battle that ultimately cost him his career and his life. His story highlights the personal courage it took to challenge the Soviet system from within. The disaster was a global media event, with images of the burning reactor and the empty city of Pripyat shocking the world. This unprecedented media coverage pierced the Iron Curtain and exposed the reality of the Soviet system to a global audience. The liquidators were given medals and hailed as heroes, but many were later forgotten by the state they had saved, struggling with health problems and inadequate compensation. Their story is one of both heroism and betrayal. Chernobyl disaster is a complex tapestry of science, politics, human error, and immense courage. It is a story that resists simple explanations and continues to resonate deeply in our collective consciousness. The event marked the beginning of the end for an empire and the start of a new, painful chapter for the people of Ukraine and Belarus. The soil of the exclusion zone is a graveyard of technology, with hundreds of abandoned vehicles, trucks, helicopters, and armored personnel carriers, all too radioactive to be moved. These silent, rusting machines are a testament to the scale of the cleanup operation. The disaster had a profound impact on art and culture, inspiring books, films, documentaries, and video games that explore its themes of desolation, survival, and the folly of man. The Red Forest, a pine forest near the plant that turned a ginger-brown color and died after absorbing massive doses of radiation, is another stark visual symbol of the disaster's power. The trees were bulldozed and buried, but the area remains one of the most contaminated on the planet. The initial fire in the reactor core was so hot it melted sand and created a radioactive lava-like substance called corium, which flowed into the lower levels of the plant. One of the most dangerous tasks for the liquidators was locating this molten mass, nicknamed the elephant's foot, which remained lethally radioactive for decades. The story of the 3 engineers who volunteered to wade through radioactive water in the plant's basement to open a crucial drainage valve is a legendary tale of self-sacrifice. We're told it was a suicide mission, but their success prevented a second, potentially far worse, steam explosion that could have rendered most of Europe uninhabitable. Their survival, though their health was severely impacted, was considered a miracle. The disaster's impact on the global nuclear industry was immediate and profound, leading to the cancellation of many planned reactors and a renewed focus on safety features like containment buildings and independent oversight. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, played a crucial role in investigating the accident and disseminating its lessons to the global community, fostering a new level of international cooperation on nuclear safety. The children of Pripyat, evacuated from their homes, carried with them not just their few belongings but also the invisible burden of radiation exposure, leading to a tragic epidemic of thyroid cancer. The psychological scars of being an evacuee, of losing one's home and community, have been passed down through generations. The Chernobyl disaster was not an act of God. It was a direct result of a cascade of human decisions made within a flawed political and technological system. It serves as the ultimate cautionary tale about the need for a culture of safety that transcends national pride and political ideology. The truth, once suppressed, ultimately found its way out, carried on the wind and in the cells of those who were there. The world is now the keeper of that truth, with a solemn responsibility to remember the lessons learned at such a terrible cost. The final, enduring image of Chernobyl is one of profound and lasting silence, a quiet that speaks volumes about the price of hubris. It is the silence of an abandoned city, the silence of a poisoned forest, and the silence of voices lost too soon. This silence is Chernobyl's most powerful and enduring legacy, a warning that echoes through time. The disaster was a stark reminder that some technological mistakes have consequences that last for millennia. It forced humanity to confront the long-term stewardship required for the nuclear age. The story of Chernobyl is ultimately a story about truth, its suppression, its slow emergence, and its ultimate, undeniable power. The fight for that truth was as heroic as the fight against the fire itself. The disaster's legacy is a call for vigilance, for questioning authority, and for placing human values at the center of all scientific endeavor. The world must never forget the hidden truths of Chernobyl, lest we be condemned to repeat them. The cost of secrecy was written in the suffering of millions and the contamination of a continent. The event was a global wake-up call, demonstrating that the consequences of technological failure do not respect national borders. The courage of the few who dared to speak the truth in the face of a repressive state is a central part of the Chernobyl story. Their actions saved countless lives and helped to change the course of history. The disaster is a permanent scar on the landscape and on the human soul, a reminder of the darkness we can unleash. But it is also a story of resilience, of nature's ability to reclaim what was lost, and of the human spirit's capacity for sacrifice and love in the face of unimaginable horror. The final lesson of Chernobyl is that humanity's greatest challenge is not conquering nature, but conquering our own capacity for denial and self-deception. The truth, however painful, is the only foundation upon which a safe and sustainable future can be built.